Sorry, guys, my audio was just a little cut out there. Just letting you know. In today's Daily Cyber, we're going to have John Chrysler. He's going to be our expert on today. He's the Vice President of Commercial Service at OneZero Solutions. He has over 30 years of experience in the cybersecurity and technology space, serving as CISO, CIO, as well as a consultant across healthcare, government, and other regulatory or regulated industries. He specializes in building and scaling security programs that align with business goals, especially in complex environments like mergers and acquisitions, critical infrastructure, and the defense industrial base. He's also an educator and a thought leader, having launched multiple successful courses on cybersecurity, compliance, and AI governance, which is going to be great for us to cover. What drives John is helping companies become compliant and resilient with the ability to respond, recover, and thrive in the face of current evolving cybersecurity landscape. So this is going to be a really exciting episode. So let's hack at it.
How about now?
There we go. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yep, perfect.
We got it.
Got some technical issues there, but that's okay. We're all good.
Yeah.
So John, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks, Brandon, for having me. Appreciate it, and happy to be here and talk about these topics.
It's just exciting. I mean, what are you seeing right now? If you were going to give a kind of a snapshot, like what are you seeing in the industry right now?
You know, I'm seeing a lot of vulnerability and risk. A lot of companies that I have talked to throughout the years are just not where they need to be. And, you know, there's some of us that are out there in the world trying to help these companies and people, and you wonder, what are they waiting for? Like, are they waiting to be breached? Are they waiting to be fined, you know, compliance-wise? But unfortunately, and I hope that soon we're able to have a different discussion with a different outcome. Right. But right now I'm seeing companies that are just not where they need to be. And sometimes I'm not sure why.
Right. It's pretty crazy, like all the things that are happening right now when it comes to the cybersecurity industry and then with the organizations. Now, how should companies think about cybersecurity differently when going through a merge and an acquisition?
Yeah, so Brandon, one of the things that we focus on as a specialty area is helping companies that are going through mergers and acquisitions, whether it's the acquiring company or it's the company being acquired by somewhere else. The idea here is to get both sides ready for that transaction, right? And there's so much out there to refer to as far as history and lessons learned about companies that have either been on one side of that equation and have not gotten themselves ready, which means, again, like we just talked about, they're not ready from a cybersecurity and compliance perspective. And so what ends up happening is that a company, let's say a company acquires a smaller company or another company, they're focused a lot of times on typical things that companies, why do companies buy other companies? They want the geography, they want the customer base, they want the revenue. They're probably not as concerned as to how secure that company is that they're buying or how compliant. Let's say maybe that the company they're acquiring says, hey, we've got SOC 2 or ISO 27001. But how good was that audit? How rigorous? Did they maybe pay somebody a little amount and got that rubber stamp? So yeah, they're certified, but is it real under the covers? And so if you're the acquiring company, you see this a lot in MSPs, you see this a lot in other industries as well, where they're acquiring other MSPs, again, to get that foothold, that market share, but they're not thinking about the security, who the suppliers are to that company, and what was that relationship like? Where did that get forged? Even down to as far as the people that they're acquiring, right? The staff. Now, a lot of times, unfortunately, during acquisitions, we see a lot of staff end up being not absorbed, but ultimately let go.
Right.
You know, that's unfortunate, but suppose they don't. Suppose, you know, they acquire it and now they're still operating. When's the last time background checks were done and how rigorous was that? Things change. I see companies, they say, hey, we did a background check on Tommy 15 years ago. Okay. Things change.
Right.
So yeah, it's about that visibility into this whole thing and the cyber risks, and that's what we focus on. We have a whole offering around it. I won't get into, you know, I'm not trying to sell that here, but it's about making sure companies that are interested in the cyber risk of a company that they're about to acquire Or if you're trying to be acquired and you want to put your best foot forward, you want to show as good as you could. How do I get ready to be able to have a defensible position and say, we are as real as we look?
Right. Now, in that context, what would companies have to look for? So if I'd say Fortune 500, Fortune 100 company knocking on my door today saying, hey, Brandon, I want to buy you. I want to buy your business. We like what you're doing. What do I need to do to prepare? Like, what are some steps that I need to take?
Yeah, it runs the gamut, and so I kind of have this process, think questionnaire, because that's what it is. Even if you're doing a compliance audit, right? Somebody's got a bunch of questions to ask you to see how you fare against what are some industry best practices or controls and regulations that are out there. So we do the same thing when it comes to M&A. We look at kind of not so much the financial health, right? That's probably already been looked at. Mm-hmm. We're not looking at what industries and customers you serve and how many customers you have. That's probably been looked at. But we look at things like, do you have the appropriate certification? So let's just say you're being acquired, your company's being acquired. Yeah. Should you have SOC 2 and ISO 27001? To make you a better target, to get more for your business, right? The multiples, everybody talks about the multiples. Well, this is another one. If you're certified, you probably can get a better deal for yourself as the selling company, if you will, or the one being acquired, than those that don't. You've got more to give, more to offer. Now, also look at your third-party vendor relationships. Who are your suppliers, and how strong are those connections? Here's the thing. If you're acquired, are those relationships going to disappear in a blink of an eye? Or no, you've got a repeatable, defined playbook and run book that the acquiring company can now use. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. Maybe, just maybe, you're using the same technology providers and solutions that they are, or similar at the same level, so that it's easy for them to integrate you into their operation. So it's about the ease of operation. And look, if they acquire you and then they find out after the transaction has closed, you've got licensing problems, you've got deployment problems, you've got vendors that are just problem children.
Right.
And they find out after the transaction, that's not going to be any fun for anybody.
Do you guys do an assessment? And I'm going to ask this because I know I've dealt with this and I've had clients that have been on both sides of the fence. Do you recommend that they do their own internal assessment on the IT environment, the maturity there, and then their security, and then map it to something like you mentioned ISO, making sure those controls are mature, they're in place, they're configured, they're managed properly?
Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. And my favorite, my go-to framework, if you will, is NIST CSF now in 2.0. Okay. I like it because it's comprehensive. It's not too bad. It takes work to go through it. It does. I think there's something like 150-ish questions that are asked to get somebody through. And then from that, they're mapped to the controls. What I like about NIST CSF is that it's generic. I can basically apply that and utilize that with just about anybody coming forward that says, look, John or Brandon, I don't know how secure and how mature our program is. I don't even know what to look for. To answer your first question, do I recommend they do it internally? Yes and no. I mean, if they've got their own staff and their own teams and their own IT security or GRC people, sure, go ahead. Most companies don't have that kind of expertise in-house, so I highly recommend going and finding a trusted advisor like a Brandon or a John that can come in and do this. And again, it's not about selling, it's about helping and advising. And I like to call it putting your arm around that customer and saying, look, we've got you. We understand. We know how to do this. We're going to make it as painless as possible. But it is a structured approach that, at least that's my approach that I go through. Now, look, if a customer disagreed and they said, no, you know what, we want you to do that linked to ISO 27001 because we've been trying to get our ISMS and our program together. Okay, no problem. It's easy to shift to that. Right. There's not a lot of others that I would highly recommend customers try to align to. Now, look, if you're healthcare, there's HIPAA. If you're defense industrial base, there's NIST 800-171 and CMMC. At the end, under the covers of all of them, you're going to find NIST. Right. And that's why I like aligning to NIST. Absolutely.
As your base framework, which makes sense. Now, one thing I do a little different than yourself, John. When I work with them, the sad part is it's the accountability aspect, right? Because it has to be, like you mentioned, it has to be defensible. So when the inquiry company comes in and they have their experts and they go, what's the level of this? We got to be able to speak to it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and not going, I don't know. That doesn't work. I'm not sure. Why don't you have MFA on the actual privilege accounts? Good question. I don't know. Right. So a lot of times when I work with the organizations, I tell them, yeah, it's going to be like an audit. It's going to be assessment. There's going to be accountability. I'm not judging you, but we got to be able to answer these questions in the case that their experts come in and say, what's going on with this control? What's happening with this control? We have to be able to explain it. Like, there's some organizations where they'll come in and go, hold on. We don't see a software development lifecycle. Why don't you guys have in place with it? And then it's like, we don't develop software.
Correct.
It's not part of our business model. We don't do any of that. Oh, okay. We'll move that, but what about this? What about this? And be able to talk through each control, the maturity of it, who's managing it internally, externally, whatever that may be. How is that relationship? And sometimes I've been through acquisitions where they want all parties involved. If you have an outside MSP or MSSP, they want them part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you, Brandon. And just to kind of, wrap this topic up a little bit, it's the customer, in this case, if they're the ones trying to be acquired, that was our example here. If it's your company, you're trying to be acquired, you have to be accountable. I like to tell customers, you cannot outsource your risk in that area. You can outsource a lot of things. You can have a lot of vendors supporting you and doing things and helping you. But to your point, and you're spot on, Brandon, this is my humble opinion as a practitioner, and I think you agree. The customer has to be able to defend the hill and answer the questions. Now, can they phone in a friend, like us and say, look, I don't understand this question. But when it comes down to it, it's their company, it's their environment, it's not ours, right? We're just assisting you. And the customer has got to understand where they stand with cybersecurity risk and compliance. That's why, you originally asked me, do I recommend they do it internally? A lot of people can't get through this internally. They're going to need somebody like us to come in and help. And then what I like to say is, I'm going to set you up for success. By the time we're done with this couple of week engagement, typically, you're going to know. You're going to be in a very good spot to be able to understand what these questions mean and how to answer them in a very defensible position.
No, one thing I do add on to that, depending on the size of your environment, the complexity of your environment, that could scale, right? And then having to get artifacts. Like, one of the things that you and I know is, okay, I can answer yes, I can check the box and do that, but can we prove it? Do we have the logs? Do we have, the configuration files? Do we have this? Because they're going to want to look at that and make sure to audit that and make sure it's in place, versus we saying, yeah, sure, we have that. Our access control list is up to date and all that. Well, when's the last time you reviewed it? Oh, we just recently. And then they go through and go, why do you have an any at the end of your access control list? Yeah. Oh, I didn't know a project manager or an outside company worked on it 6 months ago. Okay, so no one validated that? X, right? Now we've caught you. Now we go through everything step by step, right?
Brandon, one of the biggest fallacies around this is what it takes to be what I like to call audit ready. And I'm going to point to a quick example, just a quick one. In the defense industrial base, CMMC now, it's hot. It's a topic of the day, right? Because their stuff is starting to drop and get really quick. And it has been for a long time, but now the gloves are off. And in that world, if you're in that world and you're listening, right, there was the self-assessment that people did, and they did a questionnaire and they came out with this score and they said, hey, we're good. We got this score. And what they did not do was think about the over 300 assessment objectives that are out there, because they didn't think they had to go read that document about what an auditor would come in. And by the way, I'm not an auditor. I don't know if you are, but I'm a consultant advisor. I'm not an auditor. But I like to get you ready to be audited. I've been audited in my career as a 3-time CISO. I've been the guy being audited. So I like to, it's almost like a game. I like to get ready for the auditors. Can I beat them at their own game? And what I mean is be audit ready. And what that is, the audit guidance that is out there for NIST, as an example, under CMMC, it's not 110 questions. It's all the assessment guidelines. An assessor could come in and say, I can inspect, I can interview, I can examine the evidence. That's what you're talking about, the evidence. Well, why don't you do that ahead of time as a customer with a trusted partner and go through mock assessments and practice this so that you're not caught off guard with what you just said, Brandon. Hey, I've got this policy. Great. When's the last time you tried it? You haven't? Let's go try it.
Right.
Let's act like it's a real audit. And that way, when it comes time for the real audit, whether we're sitting there with a customer elbow to elbow or not, they're audit ready. They know because they've been through it. And I love nothing more than getting a client ready for that. Mm-hmm. Whether it's I'm getting them ready for the audit or I'm getting them ready for the M&A transaction.
Right.
To me, it's the same thing.
Now, I got a question from the community. Someone's asking, how do you get into risk management, and how would someone get into that field?
Great question. I love that question. And there's no easy answer. Maybe there is. Maybe you'll have one. I'd say you got to have a curiosity for learning this field. There is a ton of free training out there to get people ready. There's NIST risk management framework training that's free. Mm-hmm. I've taken it, even though I'm certified in certain areas. I'm like, let me go take it and see. And I always learn something new when I do. There's obviously courses. I happen to be an instructor for Udemy. And I've got a couple courses, but I know there's a lot of courses in the Udemy catalog, not taking anything away from any other training provider, but in the Udemy platform, which is usually pretty inexpensive and sometimes free if employers buy into the plan, there's a lot of courses about getting ready, how to audit and learning these concepts, whether it's Brandon and I sitting here talking about NIST or RMF or CMMC. If you want to learn more about that stuff, because it's not all technical, although there is a lot of technical to it. Mm-hmm. So, I've got this other podcast episode. I go through kind of my episode of my journey. I was an IT practitioner first, doing networking and firewalls and servers and desktops. Then I got into IT security and I wanted to get certified. So I did Security Plus. Mm-hmm. Then I took my CISSP and then. Right. And it never stops and it never will stop. If you go to my LinkedIn and looked up my certifications, and I'm not boasting, I'm very proud, but you look at it, you could almost see the journey that John Chrisley has gone through of what certifications, what training. Either it was free or some company offered to pay, or I was a vendor and I got access to the vendor training. But I'll tell you what, there's a lot out there for people to get into this world. Reach out to me if you want some pointers and tips. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to point you to some of these references I'm talking to. But at the end of the day, for me, what I tell my staff, my colleagues, my students that I mentor through different programs, you got to be a sponge. You got to have that natural curiosity to want to learn more, build things. I've got an amazing home lab. I highly recommend that for anybody. I can play with things. I can break things in the lab that I could never want to do at work. And you can try these things and just learn. And what you're going to find is you get to a certain point, it's really not as hard as people may be thinking right now, listening to us talk about it. Mm-hmm. GRC compliance, it's not that hard, but you got to have some of the foundations, because the compliance side is looking to see, do you have policies, procedures, technical controls, governance things in place? And there's going to be some questions that are almost like you're taking a test, right? Yeah. And so once you go through it enough, I find it's a great field to be in. Every company needs some of this cybersecurity and compliance that we do. And so it's a great field to be in.
Yeah, and I think to add on, like this certification, that's what I was just kind of looking at. Like ISACA has one, the CRI, the Certified in Risk and Information Systems Controls.
Yep.
There's one like you look at FRM, Financial Risk Management, by the Global Association of Risk Professionals. The one thing I would add on to what you're saying is there's a couple areas you want to be an expert in, especially when you're looking at compliance and risk management. You want to understand business. Coming in and throwing a lot of controls and compliance to an organization, not knowing how to evaluate the business and operations, can run you into a lot of challenges with senior leadership, the executive, the owners, the board, right? Because when you're starting to do it, you need this, you need that, you need that, you're not aligning to why and speaking to the reason of the business, how it aligns, you can run into conflicts. It makes your job a lot harder, right? Second of all is understanding the difference between compliance and the technical, right? Because a lot of times they'll throw out this laundry list of technical controls, right? Policies, and there's administrative controls, technical controls, like you were talking about. Do you have your standing operating procedures, your policies, right? Any type of governance that you need to have, which a lot of them request that you have these in place and they're up to date and managed properly. but do you know how to write it? Do you understand how it relates to the business? Do you understand how it functions, right? Do you understand how to modify it if you come across one that's a little bit older, right? And guide them through that. So content writing, being a ghostwriter, being able to do that is a skill part of this. So you look at going back to understanding business, understanding the technical side, IT and security, and then being able to be like a ghostwriter to be able to go through and look through a policy and understand what that needs to meet that organization. Because I've seen some policies people write, and they're almost like a lawyer wrote it, right? And you look at this and then you go, okay, let's run through it, and they have no clue. Subsection, 1.3.1, 1.3.2, and you're like, okay, how does this relate to this process or what you're trying to do? Like, I don't know. We had someone write it. We have never gone through it. I go, it's got to be functional.
Yeah.
Like if you have these documents, it's got to be functional that you can actually run with it versus shadow IT. And we see people breaking process. Then you have, no one accountable that process doesn't work. Well, why? Because you're not doing it. When I talk to the people about what they do, they're doing this whole other different process.
Right. Yeah, Brandon, and two go backs. One, I want to speak on the business side of what you were talking about. Very key. I deal with customers in a lot of different verticals, right? And my company does as well, verticals and specialties. And look, full disclosure, I cannot be an expert on every single business out there. So I don't. I call it bringing in your team, phoning in a friend. On certain engagements for certain industries, I've got to have somebody sitting there next to me if we're advising a customer who is a subject matter expert on the business. Maybe right. They're not the technology and the cybersecurity expert, but they know the business. And sometimes you're talking to different audiences. I might be in one room talking to the CIO and the CISO and those kind of people, while the business person is talking to the CEO. And that's just a reality. Now, I get in front of the CEO and the board as well. But again, you got to know your strengths. You got to know your limitations as a practitioner and as a virtual CISO, which is sort of what, if you were to put a label on me, John, what are you? That's really what I am, as a virtual CISO or virtual CIO as well. But I make sure that I bring the right team to the table that understands that business if I don't. Now, there's a lot of businesses that I've worked with and I can understand, and I understand the business model, but you don't want to fake it. You don't want to try to give customers a guidance when you have no idea what their business is all about. And then real quick, just jumping to the policy side, boy, talk about hitting a nerve. Policies are like one of my core tenets in life. I've been through the best and the worst of policy developers and development. Everything from what you're talking about, where it was written by a lawyer or somebody with a legal degree for lawyers. I'm not saying lawyers are bad, not at all. No. They need to be part of your team. But policies that are written from that perspective are not probably going to be understood by the non-legal profession, which is who they're writing them for. And, we always hear, hey, write policies for a certain level, and you have to do that. I'm a big believer in that your policies should be easy to understand, a conversation between the company and their employees. And when I say conversation, I want to bring up this point. I was told at one point in my career, hey, we got this policy. Every single line in the policy should map back to a control. And I disagreed. I was like, I understand the concept here. I get it. And I do a lot of regulatory control mapping to policies in order to make sure that the customer is going to be covered, that anything that they need to have in policy is in there. But at the end of the day, then you stand back and you look at this policy and you say, look, can everybody in the company understand it? Right. And by the way, I also am a big proponent of, once you have a policy developed, the training, the socialization of the policy is almost as important as writing it alone. And I highly recommend that somebody in the company, unless they bring me in to do it, but somebody in the company needs to have the session or the sessions. Let's talk about a training. I've seen too many companies that go out there, and I do think this is the wrong approach. I'm not highly opinionated about a lot of things, Brandon, but this is one. I told you hit a nerve. I don't believe in somebody writes a policy and they say, it's in our policy portal, it's on SharePoint, it's out there. That's it. We're done. Everybody must comply with it. Wait a minute. To your point, maybe what if people don't understand it? Right. Number one, what if their business process, their daily day-to-day flow does not match what's in that policy at all and can never match? That means nobody did their due diligence to kind of get people together and talk about how things are really done before they went to write the policy.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
it's got to be a conversation.
100%. Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I think to answer the gentleman's question, like, or the person that asked that question, there's a lot to be in risk management. And that's why you have a lot of great experts in that field to learn that and to be able to go into an organization. Now, if you get a chance to work as an associate or a junior risk management under a team and then just glean that information, just be a sponge, that's so much better because you get to go in a real world situation, see the questions that get asked, see the challenge of the organization, see the gaps that they have as the risk managers come in going, okay, we're starting to assess. And also it's like, as you know, oh, that's not done. And also the scope starts to grow and grow and grow. Well, now we have to write new policies. Now we have to get these controls and we have to go through a procurement process, right? And it's not like it's in the environment. This is a net new solution. And all of a sudden that risk assessment starts to grow. Like, and with a risk, if you're doing a business impact analysis or a risk assessment, generally there's a cutoff and you give them a report. But a lot of that time you're seeing them grow through that assessment going, well, when should I do that? Should I do that right now? Like, that seems pretty critical. Should we do that? And you get a lot of times where you ask, you're like, yeah, looking at the risk on that's pretty high. I would talk to your team after this call and, start looking at scheduling and planning that out. Right. Okay. And then you go in the next session and I uncovered something else that I think I want to bring to your team's attention. And all of a sudden that starts to grow, right? Now, hopefully, the team's very limber and very fluent that they can start working on it because you don't want to have any gaps in the environment. And like you said, a risk assessment can take weeks, right, to do. You don't want to have at weeks done and then you do the report and then you submit it. That now it's like, oh, by the way, here's what you have to work on. Kind of want to give them that information on the go so they can start, filling any holes and remediating.
Exactly.
Now, another question I have for you, because you brought this up, vCISO. What does it mean to offer like board ready cybersecurity leadership without a full-time CISO?
Great question. Great topic. So this is something that I do and have done for quite a few years now. I refer to it as vCISO, virtual CISO. Some people may call it fractional CISO. Some people have other terms. But the idea is you're hiring a firm or a person to be in that seat as your chief information security officer, your person in charge of security. And this is typically scoped out as part of an agreement. What do you want them responsible for? What do they not have to worry about because you've got it covered? But offering a virtual CISO or a fractional CISO offering is really good for companies that either are not big enough to need a full-time CISO on staff all day, because typically in the industries that we are in, a full-time CISO is not a cheap person to have on staff. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're just not, especially if they're experienced. Now, some companies are big enough, and you get into those, Fortune 500 enterprise customers. Sure, they may have a CISO on staff, and that CISO may have a security team. But for companies that don't, and that's the majority of companies, that are out there operating, a lot of times they need help. They have the same problems, they have the same things they have to worry about as the larger enterprise customers, but either they don't have the budget, or they just don't have the know-how or the company structure to set up. Maybe the CEO of the company doesn't want the CISO reporting to him because they're a smaller company. They might be in defense, industrial-based manufacturing. And the CEO may say, look, I don't have time. I don't have the knowledge to manage a full-time CISO. And so bringing in a fractional resource, a kind of as a service, a when you need them, and then when you don't need them, you don't have to pay for it, right? And you have these structured projects and these deliverables. I've had customers that say, okay, we're going to have you on staff as part of a package. Think a color-coded bronze, gold, platinum package. And it's so many hours per month you get access to them. But they also bring, typically, if they're good, they'll bring with them a suite of services along with them that maybe you don't have those either. Everything from vulnerability scanning and penetration testing, policy writing, compliance readiness, like we're talking about GRC. Mm-hmm. Bring all this as part of an offering so that they can kind of lay this down on top of your company and say, we're bringing all this, and the good virtual CISOs have been, again, another opinion, I apologize everybody, but this is another one. The good virtual CISOs have been a CISO before in their career. And I totally believe that. I think they've sat in the chair. They've been through the audits. They've been through the internal politics and funding and budgeting and all that stuff that goes with being in a full-time CISO role. Maybe they've been through breaches. I raised my hand on this one, and kind of sheepishly, I'm not proud of this necessarily, but I've been through a couple of public breaches that became public. Not happy about it. There wasn't a whole lot I could have done about it. Things happen in our world.
Mm-hmm.
But I was in the seat where I had to hire. Number one, we had cybersecurity insurance. Ding, ding. That's another thing that we all look for. Do you have that?
Right.
My company that I was with did. We had to bring in the insurance company, bring in their forensic experts to the table. So I learned, right? I look back now. I wasn't looking at it with these goggles on at the time, but I look back at it now and I say, wow, I learned. I learned what it was like to have everything in place or not, to go through it, to come out the other side, after being in a war room several times during these breaches, and understand then what had to be put in place to prevent that from happening again. So guess what? Now, what do I bring to the table as experience? And yes, offerings and packages as a vendor. I'm on the vendor side, and I'm not ashamed of that one bit. I'm on the vendor side offering this as a service to companies that need this exact same thing. And what they're hiring experience. So that's what I mean by the whole virtual CISO.
Which is interesting because, you bring up some good points. Now, one of the things I want to dive a little bit deeper in, what area of, like, you think about a vCISO and you have all different people who kind of look at vCISO as a service, and they look at, okay, we're only going to do security controls. We're only going to do security controls and manage your internal team. We're going to only do security controls, your internal team, and maybe do like your questionnaires when it comes to outside vendors. When you look at that umbrella, when you kind of know being a CISO and what it entails, what would you say a fractional or a vCISO should be doing?
That's a great question. And, it's actually tough to answer, Brandon, because it really depends on the background and expertise of the person or the team. If we have a team of vCISOs at a company, each one likely will have different backgrounds and experiences. You might have a person who was a CISO in banking. I haven't been. Right. Not that I couldn't service a banking customer, but again, it comes down to business expertise. Mm-hmm. So you want to look at that, and you want to make sure that you've got the most well-rounded person that you're hiring. But also, every vCISO is going to have their limitation of what they can offer, what they want to offer, what they're really good at. And so I think it's about interviewing, a company that is offering vCISO to understand, what do they offer, how do they offer it, does it make sense for you and your business to plug in? That's what I call it, plug into your company, and they're going to have your back. To your point, every vCISO offering I've seen out there with almost every vendor on the market is just a little bit different, because sometimes you have vCISOs who have been a CISO in their past life, and they say, okay, I've been there, but I don't want to deal with questionnaires.
Right.
And so that's okay. They take their stance. I don't discredit them for that. They take their stance. They say, I'm going to focus on this, either the internal team, or I'm going to focus on providing you vulnerability scanning and pen testing, but nothing else. I think personally, the best vCISOs out there kind of have a well-rounded, I don't want to say complete coverage, because then I'd be misleading people. What is complete coverage? That's a topic for a whole different session. Right. But a good, complete enough coverage to cover what you need as a customer, right? The customer either knows what they need, or they're going to hear a pitch from one of us. They're going to say, that's what I need. Look, right. We all of us that are in this field, in this ecosystem of consulting companies and providing CISO as a service, we all have our preferred packages and things we want to do. I like to say, look, I want to make sure that I've got you covered. While I may have a preferred approach that I like to lay down on every engagement, I also take a lot of time to listen to the customer. What are your gaps? Maybe a customer's already got a couple of things covered, and I don't need to focus on that, and that's not their concern. Okay, let me listen to what you said and focus on, where do you need my help? It might be around compliance. It might be around risk. It might be around incident response. It might just be, and I've had one customer, they said, look, we've got all the tools known to man and the good tools. We've got people. But you know what we're not good at? We're not good at KPIs and metrics and talking about what we're doing in a way that not only the board, everybody talks about reporting to the board. You know what? When you get your time in front of the board, consider yourself lucky because it doesn't happen all the time. You're usually, and I've been in front of a few boards, I'm very blessed and thankful, but it was very few times where I actually got in front of the board. My reporting was to the executives, the CEO, the chief risk officer, the CIO, the chief medical informatics officer, or, you know, those kind of people. Right. And I had to convince them that the security and compliance program was doing well. And, you know, a lot of times, and I'm sorry to be on this rant, but it's another great topic. A lot of times they don't care about things like how many viruses your antivirus product stopped or how many intrusions your firewall and IPS stopped. They look at that, and I've heard this early in my career when I was learning how to report better. They say, well, great. Then the tools that you bought with the money that we spent are working. Next. Right. What they want to hear about is, what are the risks? What do I need to be worried about? What do you need the most help with? And it's not always about tools and people. So,
right.
Yep.
So one of the approaches that I take when I do the advisory, like a VCSO, fractional VCSO, is I kind of put myself in the position of what do you need as the organization? Because a lot of times companies come to me and say, okay, I need you for this project. And I'm like, well, that's not a fractional CISO. That's a security analyst or maybe a risk advisor or something to do that one thing. I come in as a holistic view, kind of top-down approach to make sure all the areas of your business security, people, process, technology are in place and are functioning properly because, as you know, reduce risk, reduce liability, right? Help you to respond to a potential incident in an effective manner that it's minimal impact. Those are my responsibilities, and be able to now articulate that from the team, you know, outside parties, you know, third parties to you, so you can make some really, you know, good decisions, business driving decisions on how we start to mature this program and how it protects your organization. If you're coming in and rewrite policies, I can do that, but it's not going to be the best use of our time. We can hire a policy writer, right? And someone to come in and do that for that short term. And a lot of things, you know, is there's templates out there, right? They can get some templates off certain sites, bring them down, have someone come in and modify them and write them. And then Bob's your uncle. It's styled guide, it's written the way you want it, good to go. So I think when someone's looking at like a VC, so from developing their career to actually companies looking for, it's looking at someone to put in place that's going to drive your cybersecurity program.
Yeah, and Brandon, just to add on to that, I'll tell you, more times than not in my career, and by the way, I've been with a couple of different companies throughout the years, but always after I was sitting in the seat as a CISO, now I've sort of been offering this virtual CISO thing we're talking about almost at every company in some way, shape, or fashion ever since. And, you know, more times than not, you know who my customer actually is and sort of who I'm assisting and helping is a CISO who's actually at the company. And they need that higher level help. They're entrenched, they're dug in, but they need help justifying budget, staffing, tools at times. Right. And they just, you know, a lot of times they don't know how to talk, like I said, back to the executives, back to the board, how to make their program shine.
Right.
And sometimes they just need help. They need another set of hands. But I agree with what you said. You know, I will say this. We've got, as a vendor, we've got different packages for different verticals and specialties. And every single one of our packages, we highly recommend a block of hours at least for some virtual CISO, because that way we've got skin in the game along with the customer, that we are providing that high level. It's not just like we're putting in something. Right. We've got skin in the game that we're trying to put in and help you manage long term. Because one thing that people who are listening probably already know, but if they don't, is security and compliance is not a one-time hit it and you're done. Right. It's always going to be there, and it constantly changes.
Right. Now we got another question from the community. Can you share some insights into how you both bill for assessments if you're being engaged for that purpose, flat or hourly, included in an agreement? So kind of like, what's your structure for that?
Yeah. And again, everybody does it different. I'm going to give you my answer. I bet you, Brandon, you're going to give maybe the same or maybe a different answer. I don't think there is one right answer here, but let me explain a little of my methodology. And it seems to be working, you know, with most everybody. You'll know right away if it doesn't, because you'll get a customer that says that doesn't work for me. But, a lot of times customers, they want a fix. If we're talking about just an assessment, so let's say the first thing we do, and I like doing this, I like doing these projects. I get engaged with a customer and they go, we have no idea where we're supposed to be or what. We think maybe we have to comply with HIPAA and PCI, but we don't know. And what about GDPR? Do we have to comply with that? And where's CMMC and ISO? So a lot of times there's a lot of confusion. And I like to come in and say, okay, look, like we said earlier in the session, my recommendation is we start with a NIST CSF based framework assessment.
Right.
And of course, if you say it like that, people say, okay, what does that mean? Right? They're not experts in NIST. So I don't say it that way. But if they ask, or somebody is technical enough, they're going to say, what is this based on? Is this John Chrisley's framework? No. And here's why. So I've got some material. It's educational about why this approach, right? Looking at the pillars, or I call them domains still, and that's not the right term, but I call them the domains in NIST. There's 6 of them, and why this is important to look at it this way. And so if we're only coming in to do an assessment, that's all that we're being engaged to do at the moment. They don't want to look at tools and tests and other stuff later. First, they want that assessment to get that let's lay it down. Let's figure out where we are. It ends up with a score. You could think about a heat map score. You could think about that spider diagram, right? But it's a maturity score on where you are. And I didn't come up with it. I just execute it and come up with a scoring. It comes out with if done right, if your consultant does it right, it comes out with a plan of action and milestones that lets you know, here's your roadmap. And it can be anywhere from the next, as you said before, this could be this week to next week, the next 3 weeks, the next 6 months, and up to a year. I don't like to look out past a year unless I need to, unless the evidence that I'm seeing needs to, but I like to give them a year roadmap. And as far as how that engagement is typically priced, not only by me, but a lot, I like to do a fixed fee project. Nobody likes surprises. If you're not good enough in your quoting as the person doing it to be able to tell a customer, look, I think this is, based on, and by the way, and I'm sorry to be all over the place, but there's a lot to it. There's a lot, and I try to make it easy on the customer, but I do a lot of analysis to say, it's not always the size of the customer or the number of employees, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it's number of locations, and you do have to look at the size of the company because that does factor in, but I don't price it. I do not by the number of people you have, because a lot of times that doesn't matter to me. I don't care if you've got 10 or 1,000. I'm not auditing all 1,000 people and doing interviews with them. I'm auditing the program. And so my audience, my assessment audience is probably much smaller in a core team, but I do take into effect the size. I look at the industry they're in, because that does mean the complexities. And by the way, I've got a kind of a questionnaire. It's a very simple questionnaire that I start with to ask people some of these questions. It's very simple. They fill it out and I sort of glean a lot of information from it. And then I go back and I put together a fixed fee engagement to go through this NIST CSF-based roadmap gap assessment. And I have deliverables. Now, the thing is, and I've had people ask me, well, John, how can you be so sure? You gave me a price. It looks pretty darn good. I mean, it's not free. And it does cost money and it takes time. It can be a couple of weeks to a couple of short months, depending usually on the customer's availability for things. And I'm very flexible with that. But they say, John, how can you do this for that price? And again, it's not a $1,000 engagement. I'll just say that up front. I won't say what it is, but I'm not that kind of vendor. It is a premium service. It is honed in years of experience in doing this, but I'm very confident that the results are going to be very value additive to the company. They're going to get a lot out of it. And it's because I know what goes into doing these. I've done to me and for me. Go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead.
Jumping back into the question, because I know what they're looking for is, so basically kind of recapping what you're saying, there's generally a scoping part of it. You generally scope the engagement. Now, depending if it's a risk assessment, a cybersecurity gap assessment, things along that line, normally there are separate engagements. It's not part of your vCISO service, right?
Correct.
Normally these are separate engagements that you're doing that they brought you in for that specific need. Because when you're looking at risk assessment as part of your vCISO hours, you'll burn a lot of those hours. That what happens is, say they want you for 10 hours a month, 20 hours a month. Well, if you do that assessment, you could burn 60 to 90 to 100 hours in the first month to 2 months,
Right.
meeting with teams, going over policies, documentations, making your notes, doing all that, just kind of understanding the landscape of the IT, the people, process, technology can take a long time. So a lot of times those are assessed, scoped, and engaged separately of each assessment. Like you said, the assessment's done, statement of work is now, depending on, like you talked about, the industry, the size of the organization's compliance and regulatory will move that scoping up, right? From a smaller engagement to a larger engagement, because there's more complexity. Because now you have to make sure that, are you aligning with their CMMC, their ISO, their HIPAA, their SOC 2 type 2, right? Whatever that may be. Are they, or there could be industry compliance and regulatory, because they might be in financial, they might be in manufacturing,
Correct.
right? Different types of healthcare, if they have like different types of technology in the environment, there might be different things they're working on. So you got to know, because that now adds complexity to the gaps, right? To what you're going to be asking for, right? Because if you did a NIST one, it's pretty straightforward and standard what but also you have to add NIST plus HIPAA plus this plus that, starts to scale that out. So to answer that person's question, scoping, statement of work, and the complexity of what you find from your scope, separate engagement. Again, most of us do fixed fee, retainer or fixed fee type of contracts, right? With a master service agreement, statement of work, and then you start the engagement. A lot of times that engagement's an interview based. Sometimes they ask you to come on site and review things. You might do that. The other thing is there's generally reporting. All right. So give yourself some time to write a report. So don't think you're just doing the assessment and then you're talking about, you have to give yourself, and I know for my team, it's anywhere from 10 business days to 20 business days, depending on the size of the organization, to write that report. And then you have to present the report, edit any kind of gotchas that the team comes back and says, okay, can you make a change here? Can you do that? Can you write the executive summary in this way? Because we have to report it to the board. So you make those changes and then you do that. And then there's a final copy that they sign off of. So that's generally the process most organizations go through when they're doing any type of assessment. Anything you want to add, John?
Yeah, and Brandon, I just want to amplify what you just said. The reporting part after the assessment is done is probably the most important part of that whole project. And I say project, very key. And you stated it better than I could in the beginning. If somebody has you come in and do an assessment, to me that's a project. It's a one-time, following PMI guidelines, right? As a former PMP, there's a start, there's a finish. Mm-hmm. Your project of an assessment is going to be done. It's going to finish at the end with the report and the readout and putting that. Now, where the as a service and the ongoing comes in is after. If your customer likes what you said, but they need help implementing some of the fixes and the issues, that's where you can really help your customer and stay engaged. So that's how these usually go.
Yeah, no, so true. Now, that's great. I mean, kind of gives them an idea, the life cycle of an assessment, how we kind of work through. Now, the last question, I know we got like 10 minutes and it's probably a little bigger of a topic. It might be something that might carry over to another session that we have, is with AI automation evolving so rapidly, how can business adopt new technologies without introducing new risks, specifically around AI?
Yeah, great topic. And I'll try to be as quick as I can to give us, more time here at the end, the best I can. I've been doing a lot of AI risk work here now for a while. It is a topic of the day. It's a big topic for a lot of companies. And I'm very happy and blessed for the customers that reach out and say, hey, we've got some questions. We need some help. There is some governance frameworks out there, right? NIST has one as a governance framework. So the best times I have are when customers reach out and say, look, we've either adopted AI broadly or a little bit, in our company, or we want to, but we want to do it smartly. And we want to make sure that we're not, opening up the barn door and letting some AI engine get access to all of our company data. And then it's now out there in the wild because we didn't know how to turn any of that off or set it up securely. I've had companies that come forward that, and I won't mention the company or the industry because it might give away too much. But I had a company that came and said, look, we want to implement a certain product. They already knew the product they wanted to implement. They said, but we need somebody to do a real deep dive on that product. It says it can do all this stuff from role-based to not using it to train, publicly for others. But we want somebody to really go up and down the backside of this product, kind of do that deep background check on the product. And there's no exact set way to do that.
Right.
But I've got a methodology that I proposed, and they liked it. And they were going to put, all I'm going to tell you is, in the audience, they were going to put the most sensitive info you could imagine in this AI. And so it cannot get out. Even within their own firm, other professionals within their firm and other departments could not even see data from one professional that they're putting in there. So it had to be very firewalled off within the tool. And the tool that they chose to use, which is a very well-known tool out there in the market, happened to fit the bill, at least on paper. But they wanted to say, so I started and call that third-party risk assessment, right? They're going to bring in a product. They want a deep dive on the product itself. And so I was able to build a risk profile. Luckily, the company appears to be as secure and compliant as they say they are through interviews and deep dives and all the information I could do. So I was able to give a professional opinion for them to go by that, your instincts are right. This is the right tool, but you have to set it up the way they tell you to. You have to make sure you do it the right way. Otherwise, there could be accidental leakage and unintended use. And then from there, it comes in the framework. So they wanted to adopt the NIST AI RMF framework to later. And they said, hey, we want it later. We want a controls-based assessment after we got this in place. We got it up. They'd already written policies, right? Ding, ding, right? First place you start. They'd already written policies. They had a subcommittee formed to make sure that this gets done right. They had a lot of things in place. I was very proud of them as a customer. They made my job easier. But then they want to come in. And so if you look at everything that I just said, there's a way to do AI the right way, in a lot of people's opinions, the right way, the secure way, keep it compliant. Will breaches happen? Yeah, I'd be silly if I sat here and tell you that breaches can never happen to anybody because, well, history proves me wrong.
Right.
But there are ways to protect yourself and your company. What you don't want to do, let me just say this real quick and spin it on this. What you don't want to do is go into using AI without a strategy and a plan. Your employees will find the least path of resistance. They'll be using, and I don't want to pick on any one AI engine, but let's be real. They'll just open up ChatGPT. They'll open up, all these tools, and they'll start using it, which can be fine until they start copying data in from your company that maybe they should not be. So there's ways to do this. AI is a huge business enabler. It helps people be better human beings with their work. It'll help them write better emails, write better proposals, help them remember things that they otherwise would have forgotten to do. But you got to be real careful with it.
So one thing I'd add on to that is, if you're going to look at an AI solution, and it's anyone's listening to this, proof of concept. Do a testing environment, have it, air gapped in an isolated environment with dummy data and test it, right? And do that due diligence, because again, like you said, go through your third-party assessments, look at SOC 2 type 2, look at their, their controls that they have in for implementing, and where's the data residency and how it's stored, and, is it stored in an encrypted state, like all that stuff. Well, you want to do a proof of concept with false data to see if that's really true, because what they say and what they do, are they actually aligned? Because, and I'll use an example. Say, for example, you do that and you put fake PHI or PII data, but it's not encrypted, right? It's not masked, right? When you go back through and you go look at the data sources and you go, okay, hold on, why can I read that? Why can anyone go in and read that data? Yeah. Well, if we put our data in there, our actual data, that's what's going to happen. Well, it's not secure anymore. As well as I do. Then you have compliance issues. You have security issues. You have problems with insurance because is your data at rest? Is it encrypted at rest, encrypted in motion? Well, it was until we had the AI solution, but now it's not because it's in this AI solution. And we forgot to tell you, it's in all different clusters. So it's all different servers all across the US and some in Mexico and some all over. Now it's like, whoa, what just happened? So those are the things I recommend as you're going through it. Due diligence, due care is so important in cybersecurity, is you do that and you score it. You have some sort of scoring metrics that you're going through to evaluate, did it pass the sniff test? Did it pass all our compliance? If not, sometimes, which is good, you go back to the partner and say, look, hey, you know what? We found this. It's a vulnerability. Can you, is that on your roadmap to fix it? Or it might be something like, sorry, that's the way it works. Then POC's done, proof of concept's done, we're out. Like, we can't do that. But I think too many organizations are talking about what you're saying is the efficiency. Oh my God, this can help us. This can record. We see it a lot of times with Zoom, Teams, all that. It can record our meetings. It can schedule our meetings. It can look at the notes. It can create emails off that. But hold on. Are you talking to a client that's part of a confidential conversation? Do you have NDAs in place? Where's that data now going that they've talked to something very sensitive, confidential? Who now has access to it? Right? So these are all the concerns and you look at the CIA track, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Us on security, confidentiality, the business availability, right? In the middle is the integrity of the data, right?
Brandon, I've got a saying that, again, this is in that CISO world. It's not about saying no necessarily. It's about saying yes with the right guardrails in place. Let's make sure that you're setting yourself up ahead of time for success, because as you alluded to with a PHI example, you don't want to find out later on that you've committed a breach. You've executed a breach under those rules just by implementing this technology, and it's going to be found out later. That's going to come back to hurt people later.
Well, here's the thing you and I know is you don't want later that's an incident and now you're counting how many records you have in this system, because now as a reporting obligation, you realize you have 100,000 records in this system that is PII, PHI, then now you have a reporting obligation. And you're like, what just happened? Why didn't anyone catch this? Why is it there? You don't want to have that conversation. Awesome. Well, John, we're coming up with last minute. Best way to contact you, I know as you mentioned that, is on your LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's the best way for anybody that wants to reach out. My email's a little bit longer, so if you hit me up on LinkedIn, connect with me. Let me know that if you happen to be listening. Let me know you saw the episode, you saw the show. I'm always happy to connect with people, share ideas. It's not always about trying to sell something, but I do work for a firm where we do offer services, so we're happy to help companies. Just reach out. Let's have a conversation. There's no obligation, no cost to that. The company is OneZero Solutions at OneZeroLLC.com. And we are happy to talk to people to help them out and get them on the path to better security and better compliance, less risk.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. This was a great conversation. We'll keep in touch. There's a lot I still want to ask you later. We might have you on another episode.
Great, Brandon. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So that was a great episode. I hope you guys learned a lot, talking about vCISO, talking about different strategies, talking about just the different areas of business and development, and how you can look at how fractional CISO will work with the business, work with the organization for assessments, gap assessments, security controls. Then you look at what we talked about is AI automation. The next greatest thing that's happening out there, I'm sure everyone's having that conversation. You're starting to talk about what you can do, what solutions you can use, how you can implement it. And it's when you look at all different types of technologies, you look at most of them now have some sort of component they're starting to integrate with AI technology. So a lot of great conversations. Please let us know if you have any questions. Reach out to me, reach out to John. We're here to help and support. So thank you so much for watching this episode. Don't forget, software is hackable, being connected is vulnerable. I'll see you next Daily Cyber.